There is a particular quality to the silence of a Scottsdale, Arizona evening. It is not an empty silence. It is a living, breathing thing filled with the low, dry rustle of unseen lizards in the bougainvillea, the distant, mournful cry of a coyote, and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of 100,000 air conditioners, all working in quiet unison to hold the vast, indifferent heat of the Sonoran Desert at bay. For 15 years, this silence has been my home. And for 15 years, its most constant, most comforting, most cherished feature has been the sound of my best friend's laughter. Margo Sterling. A woman I had trusted quite literally with my life, a trust that I would later learn. She had been methodically, patiently, and with a heart of pure, cold stone, weaponizing against me from the very beginning. Our friendship was born, as so many late-in-life friendships are, from the ashes of a shared grief. We met at a newcomer's orientation at the Solana Oasis Retirement Community. It was a ghastly affair, a forced fun social with lukewarm iced tea and a relentlessly cheerful activities director. We were both newly widowed, two women in our early 60s. Adrift in the strange, new, and terrifyingly quiet world of a life without the partners we had loved for over 4 decades. I was a retired history professor, an introvert by nature, a woman who had always preferred the quiet company of books to the loud, messy business of people. She was a retired sales executive, a charismatic, vibrant social butterfly. A woman who could charm a room with a single, dazzling smile. We were polar opposites. And we were, from that first awkward afternoon, inseparable. She saved me. In those first few foggy years of my widowhood, when the silence of my new, empty condo felt like a physical weight, Margo was my lifeline. She would show up at my door, a bottle of Chardonnay in one hand and a deck of cards in the other. "I are not going to sit around and let the ghosts win, Judith," she'd declare, her voice a warm, welcome intrusion into my quiet misery. She taught me how to play bridge. She dragged me to water aerobics classes. She introduced me to her growing circle of friends. She, in her loud, vibrant, and wonderfully bossy way, rebuilt my world. I had always been the academic, the planner. My late husband Robert and I had lived a quiet, ordered life. He was a tenured professor of literature. I was a professor of history. Our world was one of books, of ideas, of carefully planned sabbaticals and meticulously managed retirement. Accounts. I had managed our finances my entire adult life. I was competent, I was organized, and I had always believed, a shrewd judge of character. Margo became the one, glorious exception to my ordered life. She was the chaos, the spontaneity, the joy. And I trusted her. I trusted her with my house keys when I would go to visit my son, David, and his family in Phoenix. I trusted her with my stories, my fears, my deepest and most private griefs. Friendship, forged in the crucible of loss, felt as solid and as unshakable as the mountains that ringed our quiet desert home. 15 years passed. We aged. The world became a more complicated, more digital, and more confusing place. And as it did, my reliance on Margo, my brilliant, charming, and seemingly modern friend, only deepened. While I was still more comfortable with a card catalog than a cloud server, Margo had embraced the digital age with a passion. She had the latest iPhone. She was an expert at navigating the labyrinthine complexities of social media, and she seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of the online world that I, a historian of the dusty analog past, found utterly baffling. She became my tech guru, my digital ambassador, my patient guide through the treacherous new world of online forms and two-factor authentication. And it was always, always, under the guise of her boundless, generous help. The moment that I now see as the true beginning of the end. The moment the predator began to patiently, lovingly set her trap came last year. It was tax season. I was sitting at my desk, staring in utter, helpless frustration at the IRS's new, mandatory secure e-file website, a user interface so poorly designed, so deeply counterintuitive, that it felt like a deliberate act of psychological warfare. After my third attempt had resulted in my account being temporarily locked, I was on the verge of tears. I did what I always did when the modern world became too much to bear. I called Margo. "Oh, Judy, you poor thing," she'd said, her voice a symphony of sympathy. "Don't you worry about a thing. Those government websites are a nightmare. They're designed by sadists. I'll be right over." She arrived 10 minutes later, a calming, competent presence, carrying a box of my favorite pastries from the local bakery. "First rule of digital warfare," she'd said with a wink. "Always bring snacks." For the next hour, she sat beside me at my desk, patiently walking me through the arcane process. "Okay, now you need to enter your social security number. To verify your identity," she'd say, her gaze politely averted, but her eyes, I now realize, seeing everything. "Now it's going to ask you for your mother's maiden name and the city where you were born." The usual security questions. She would help me type the answers, her perfectly manicured finger pointing to the correct box on the screen. When we finally came to the password reset page, she'd sigh dramatically. "Honestly, Judy, your password system is a mess. Need something stronger and something you can actually remember." She had pulled out a small leather-bound notebook from her purse. "Let's create a new, secure password for you, and I'll write it down here for you in your own little password book, so you never have to worry about it again." It had seemed at the time like an act of profound organizational kindness. She had helped me create a new, complex 16-character password. And she had, as promised, written it down for me on the first page of the new notebook, which she had then handed to me with a triumphant flourish. It was my new, personal, and deeply compromised digital Bible. And she, my helpful, wonderful best friend, had been its first and only scribe. The tax forms were successfully filed. She had saved me from a day of bureaucratic misery. I had thanked her profusely, my heart filled with a deep and abiding gratitude for her friendship. She had just smiled. "That's what friends are for, Judy," she'd said, "to look out for each other. At our age, you never know who you can trust. We have to be each other's keepers." The memory of those words now makes me physically ill. Our life settled back into its comfortable rhythm. We played bridge at the clubhouse every Tuesday and Thursday. We had dinner together on Saturdays. Her kindness, her helpfulness, was a constant, reassuring presence. She was the sister I never had. A few months after the tax incident, I was planning my annual 2-week trip to Phoenix to spend time with my son, David, and my grandchildren. Margo, as always, insisted on helping me prepare. "Now, don't you worry about a thing while you're gone," she'd said, as we sat on my patio drinking iced tea. "I'll get your mail for you every day. I'll water your plants. I'll pop in on the house just to make sure everything is in order." "Margo, you don't have to do that," I'd said. "Nonsense," she'd insisted. "It's no trouble at all, and it will give you peace of mind. Just leave a spare key under the mat." Had trusted her, of course. For 15 years, she had been the one person in my new life I had trusted completely. The one person I knew, with an absolute and unwavering certainty, would always be there for me. I look back at that woman, at the trusting, grateful, and deeply naive 75-year-old version of myself, and I feel a profound and aching pity for her. She was sitting in the warm Arizona sun, enjoying a glass of iced tea with her best friend, a woman she loved like a sister. And she had absolutely no idea that she was having a final, friendly chat with the predator who was, at that very moment, patiently, meticulously, and with a heart as cold and as barren as the desert itself, planning to devour her entire life. I returned from my 2-week visit with David and my grandchildren feeling refreshed and happy, my heart full. The first thing I did upon returning to Solana Oasis was call Margo. We met for our traditional post-trip debrief on my patio. A pitcher of freshly brewed iced tea between us, the late afternoon sun casting long, cool shadows across the flagstones. I told her all about my grandchildren's latest triumphs, my granddaughter's first soccer goal, my grandson's surprisingly sophisticated drawing of a dinosaur. And she, in turn, told me about the quiet, uneventful 2 weeks in our sleepy community. Everything was perfectly peaceful here. Judy, she'd said with a warm smile, the mail is on your kitchen counter. The plants are watered. And the only excitement was Mrs. Gable's cat getting stuck up a palm tree again. I kept a good eye on the place. No trouble at all. I felt a familiar wave of deep, abiding gratitude for her. In a world that often felt transient and disconnected, my friendship with Margo was a bedrock, a constant. She was the family I had. Chosen. I should have known that the quietest moments are often the ones that precede the storm. It's the first tremor, the first tiny hairline crack in the foundation of my reality appeared a week later. It was a single, innocuous-looking piece of mail, mixed in with my usual assortment of catalogs and bills. It was a letter from a major credit card company, one I had not done business with in over 20 years. I opened it. It was not junk mail. It was a formal, personalized letter. Dear Judith Hemlock, it began. Thank you for your recent request to update the mailing address on your Platinum Rewards account. We have successfully processed your request. All future correspondence will be sent to your new address on file, 14B Juniper Way, Phoenix, AZ. I stared at the letter, a profound sense of dislocation washing over me. Platinum Rewards. I didn't have such an account. And one for B Juniper Way, Phoenix. I had never heard of the place. My mind, the logical, methodical mind of a history professor, immediately began to cycle through the possibilities. A simple clerical error, of course. Someone with a similar name. 'Twas the only explanation that made sense. Picked up the phone and called Margo. How strange, she'd said, after I read the letter to her. Her voice was a perfect, calming balm of reason. Oh, Judy, you have no idea how common this is. These big companies, their databases are a complete mess. They probably merged your old closed account from years ago with some other poor woman's file. And the address in Phoenix. It's probably a mail forwarding scam. A what? Asked. Oh, it's a nasty new trick, she explained with the confident authority of a tech expert. Scammers send these fake letters, hoping you'll get scared and call the number on the back to correct the error. Then they'll ask for your personal information to verify your identity. It's a phishing scheme. A very clever one. You did absolutely the right thing by calling me first. She had chuckled. You're too trusting, my friend. It's a good thing you have me. I had felt a surge of pure, unadulterated relief. Of course. A scam. It made perfect sense. So what should I do? Just shred it, she'd said, her voice full of a breezy confidence. Don't call them. Don't engage. Just throw it away and forget it ever happened. So I did. I took the first crucial piece of evidence in the war against me, I ran it through my paper shredder and I turned it into a pile of meaningless, confetti-like strips. I had been presented with a red flag, and my best friend, my trusted guardian, had calmly, lovingly, and expertly convinced me that it was green. The second red flag appeared a month later. I was doing my monthly reconciliation of my bank statement, a ritual I had performed without fail for 50 years. I was a meticulous record keeper. And there, nestled between a charge for my monthly book club dues and a payment to the community's landscaping service, was a small, strange, and entirely unfamiliar charge. Gamers Universe $49.99. I stared at it. I was a 75-year-old woman whose idea of a game was a well-played hand of bridge. The last time I had played anything resembling a video game was a brief, baffling, and deeply unpleasant encounter with Pong in 1978. This time, the feeling was not just unease. It was a sharp, definite spike of fear. This was not a letter about a phantom account. It was a real charge, a real debit from my own personal checking account. My financial fortress had been breached. I called Margo, my voice trembling slightly. This time, she came over immediately, her face a mask of grave concern. "Okay, Judy, don't panic," she said, her voice calm and authoritative as she looked at my laptop screen. "This is a classic sign of a card skimmer. Someone probably stole your debit card information at a gas station or a restaurant. It happens all the time." She took control. She was magnificent. She was the take-charge, competent executive she had been in her former life. She sat beside me, coached me on what to say, and then held my hand as I called the bank's fraud department. We spent an hour on the phone. We reported the fraudulent charge. We canceled my old debit card and ordered a new one. We put a temporary fraud alert on my account. Throughout the entire stressful ordeal, Margo was my rock. She was my advocate. She was my protector. When I had gotten off the phone, shaken and exhausted, she had made me a cup of tea, you see. "Judy," she'd said, her voice full of a sad, worldly wisdom. "The world is full of these digital vultures. And a woman like you, a widow living alone. You are a prime target. You are too nice. You're too trusting." She had patted my hand. "It's a good thing you have me to watch your back. We're going to have to be much, much more careful." From now on, she had made me feel so safe, so protected. She had taken an event that was a direct result of her own insidious work, and she had used it to reinforce my utter and complete reliance on her. She was not just my best friend. She was my guardian, my keeper. It was a brilliant, elegant, and deeply evil piece of psychological manipulation. And I, her trusting, grateful friend, had walked right into the trap, thanking her for the privilege every step of the way. The final, catastrophic red flag. The one that finally pushed my carefully ordered world to the brink of collapse came on a Monday morning. The phone rang. It was not Margo. It was a man with a quiet, serious voice who introduced himself as Mr. Davies from the Senior Client Fraud Prevention Unit at my main brokerage firm in New York, the firm that managed my entire retirement portfolio. It's my life savings. "Good morning, Mrs. Hemlock," he said. "I'm just calling this morning to verify a recent transaction request on your account." "My account?" I asked, a sense of dread washing over me. "Haven't made any transaction requests." "Yes, that's why I'm calling," he said, his voice still unnervingly calm. "We received a request this morning, submitted through the online portal to liquidate the entirety of your main equity fund and to wire the proceeds, a sum of—" he paused for a moment, $478,000 to a new external bank account. I could not breathe. My hand went to my chest. The entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. $478,000. My entire future. The money my husband and I had so carefully, so diligently saved for our entire lives. No, I whispered, my voice a strangled, pathetic thing. No, I didn't. I didn't do that. That is what we suspected, Mrs. Hemlock, he said. The request was flagged by our security algorithm. The new bank account was an offshore institution, which is unusual. We have, of course, placed an immediate and total freeze on your account. Nothing is going anywhere. But I do need you to confirm that you did not authorize this transaction. No! I cried, my voice now a raw, panicked sob. Of course. Not very good, he said. I will cancel the request and note it as a fraudulent attempt. I would strongly suggest you contact your local authorities, as it appears your online account credentials have been seriously compromised. I hung up the phone. I was shaking. My entire body was trembling with a fear so profound it felt like I was going to shatter into a million pieces. This was not a $50 charge from a video game company. This was a professional, high-level assault on my life savings. They had my password. They had gotten into the heart of my financial fortress. They had almost taken everything. In a state of pure, unadulterated panic, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I called Margo. She was at my house in less than 10 minutes, her face a perfect picture of horrified, sympathetic rage. She held me as I sobbed, stroking my back, murmuring comforting words. "Oh, you poor, poor thing," she cooed. "Those absolute monsters! How dare they?" She took charge. She was the one who insisted on calling the brokerage firm back to confirm the account was frozen. She was the one who spoke, with a fierce, protective anger, to the very polite and helpful Mr. Davies, demanding to know how their security could have been breached. She was my avenging angel, my lioness, my protector. This is exactly what I was worried about. "Judy," she said to me after she had gotten off the phone, her voice full of a grim, righteous fury. "These hackers, these scammers, they are not amateurs. This was a sophisticated professional attack. They must have gotten your information from that first fake credit card letter. I knew it." She looked at me, her eyes full of a deep and loving concern. "We have to lock everything down. We have to change every password. And from now on, maybe it's better if I help you monitor your accounts more closely. I can check them every day for you, just to make sure there's no more suspicious activity. I don't want you to have to worry about this." And I, in my state of profound shock and terror, in my overwhelming gratitude for this strong, competent, and deeply loving friend who was my only shield against the terrifying, predatory forces of the modern world, I agreed. Sat there, a trembling, terrified, and grateful old woman, and I willingly, foolishly, and with a sense of profound and utter relief, handed the final key to my entire life to the very person who was in the process of trying to steal it. The weeks that followed the attempted theft of my life savings were a strange, unsettling period of false peace. Margo, my guardian, my protector, my best friend, was now more present in my life than ever. She would call every morning to check in. She would come over in the afternoons with groceries I hadn't asked for, and she would, with a great show of dutiful diligence, sit with me at my desk once a week to monitor my accounts. She would log into my bank, my credit cards, my investment portfolio. Her brow furrowed in concentration, and she would pronounce everything safe and sound. "No more attacks from those nasty hackers, Judy," she would say with a satisfied smile. "We've locked them out for good. I should have felt safe. I should have felt grateful." But I did not. The history professor in me, the woman who had spent a lifetime analyzing narratives and searching for inconsistencies, could not shake a deep, nagging sense of unease. The story did not make sense. The attacks were too specific, too personal. It felt less like a series of random external assaults and more like a targeted, strategic campaign. I was living in a state of cognitive dissonance, my heart's deep, abiding. Trust in my best friend at war with the cold, analytical logic of my own mind. And the mind I was beginning to fear was starting to win. The final, tiny, seemingly insignificant anomaly that would unravel Margot's entire 15-year-long. Con was a package. I had ordered a rare first edition history book online, a birthday present for my son, David. The tracking information said it had been delivered to my front porch on a Tuesday afternoon. But when I went to get it, there was nothing there. Oh, porch pirates, Margot had said with a dismissive wave of her hand when I told her. They're a menace. It's the world we live in now, I'm afraid. But I lived in Solana Oasis, a gated 55-plus community with a 20 security patrol and exactly one entrance. We did not have porch pirates. I did not want to believe it. I could not believe it. But the thought, a terrible poisonous seed, had been planted. Margot had been the one to get my mail that day. Like the package had disappeared on her watch. It was a coincidence. Had to be. But for the first time, a real, tangible, and deeply heretical question formed in my mind. What if the threat isn't outside the walls? What if it's inside? The thought was so monstrous, so disloyal, that I felt a profound sense of shame. But it would not go away. That night, I made a decision. I would not accuse my best friend. I would not give in to a paranoid fantasy. I would simply do what I had always done when, faced with a historical puzzle, I would gather the facts. And there was only one person I trusted to help me do that. I called my son. I was careful with my words, my pride still a formidable barrier. I did not call him in a panic. Framed it as a prudent, forward-thinking request for professional advice. David. Darling, I began, my voice a picture of calm, elderly reason. I've been thinking a lot lately about digital security. At my age, one really can't be too careful. I was wondering if you, as my lawyer and my son, could recommend some best practices. Perhaps run a credit report for me, just to make sure everything is in order. David, who knew me better than anyone, heard the faint underlying tremor of fear in my voice. What's wrong, Mom? He asked, his tone immediately shifting from casual to concerned. Is this about that wire transfer attempt? I'm just being cautious, I insisted. I'm coming down this weekend, he said, his voice a firm, lawyerly command. We'll go through everything together. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone about your finances, especially not Margot. The fact that he had singled her out sent a fresh, cold spike of fear through me. He had always been politely skeptical of her. He found her a little too charming, a little too helpful. I had always dismissed his concerns as the baseless suspicion of a slightly overprotective son. I wasn't so sure. He arrived that Saturday morning, a briefcase in his hand, his face a mask of serious professional concern. He sat me down at my dining room table, a place that had for 15 years been the site of 1,000 happy, laughing meals with Margot. It now felt like an interrogation room. Okay, Mom, he said, opening his laptop. First things first. Let's run a full credit report. I need your social security number. I gave it to him. He typed for a moment, and then the first page of my life's financial history loaded on the screen. He was silent for a long, long time. "Mom," he finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who is the primary cardholder on the Capital One Venture X account?" "Don't have a Capital." "One card," I said. He turned the laptop around to face me, and there it was, in black and white. A credit card account opened 3 months ago. In my name, Judith Hemlock. The balance was $28,450. It was maxed out. My world started to tilt on its axis. That's not possible," I whispered. "There are two more," he said, his voice grim as he scrolled down. An Amex Gold, a Chase Sapphire, both opened in the last 6 months. Both with balances over $20,000. And then there's this. He pointed to another entry. An application for a home equity line of credit against this condo. It was filed 2 weeks ago. It was denied due to a flag on your social security number from the brokerage. Firm incident. I just stared at the screen, at the architecture of a secret life I had been living without my own knowledge. Life of debt, of high-end purchases, of a desperate, frantic spending I could not comprehend. Someone has stolen your identity, Mom, David said, his voice a mixture of anger and a deep, sad certainty. And this is not the work of some random hacker in another country. This is a long con. This is someone who knows you. And in that moment, I finally allowed myself to confront the terrible, heartbreaking truth. The secret mail drops, the convenient tech support, the constant, helpful, and deeply intrusive presence. The timeline of the new accounts, it all started right after Margo had helped me with my taxes, right after she had seen every single piece of my personal information. It was her, was my best friend. The grief was a physical, crushing thing. It was a pain far sharper, far deeper than the fear of the stolen money. The money was just paper, but a 15-year friendship, that was a life, a shared history, and it had all been a lie. Long, patient, and beautifully performed act of deception. I felt a wave of profound, soul-crushing humiliation. How could I have been so blind, so stupid? I, the history professor, the shrewd analyst of human motivation, had been the easiest mark of all. I told David everything. The password book, the spare key. It's the way she had so expertly explained away every single red flag. He listened, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He was no longer my son. He was my lawyer. And he was building a case. "Okay," he said when I had finished. "We need more than just circumstantial evidence. We need to link her to it directly." We spent the rest of the day on the phone, with him using his lawyer's authority to cut through the corporate red tape. He got a fraud specialist from the credit card company on a conference call. He asked them for the mailing address that the new cards had been sent to. It was not my address. It was an address on Juniper Way in Phoenix. 14B Juniper Way. While we waited on hold, David's fingers flew across his keyboard. He was a digital native, a man who knew how to navigate the dark corners of the internet. A few minutes later, he found it. 14B Juniper Way was not a house. It was a private P.O. box at a mail services store. He did another search. And then he turned the laptop back to me, his face a grim, terrible mask of finality. On the screen was a copy of a business registration form. The rental agreement for P.O. Box 14B, Juniper Way, and the name of the renter. The signature on the bottom line was clear as day. Margo Sterling. There it was. It's the final, damning, and irrefutable proof. It's the smoking gun. I just sat there, in the quiet of my beautiful, sun-drenched, and suddenly very cold dining room, and I felt my heart break. The grief was a tidal wave, and it consumed me. I mourned the loss of my friend. I mourned the loss of the last 15 years of my life, a period I now saw as a long, elaborate, and deeply cruel lie. And I mourned the loss of my own cherished belief in my own judgment. The grief, however, did not last. As I sat there, the full, cold, and calculated reality of her betrayal washing over me, the sadness began to recede. And just as it had in my youth, my grief began to give way to the old, familiar, and deeply motivating fire of my academic soul. The fire of a historian who has just uncovered a profound and despicable act of historical revisionism. Margo had not just tried to steal my money. She had tried to steal my life, my name, my very story. She had tried to rewrite my final chapter. I looked at my son, at his angry, protective lawyer's face, and he saw the shift in my eyes. He saw the grief being replaced by something else, something colder, something harder, something he had not seen in a very long time. She has been running a long con, I said, my voice no longer the voice of a grieving victim, but the voice of a history professor about to deliver a lecture. A 15-year-long, deeply researched, and meticulously executed operation. And the one thing I know about con artists, David, I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face, is that their greatest weakness, the flaw that brings every single one of them down in the end, is their own profound and deeply misplaced confidence. The time for being a trusting, grateful, and foolish old woman was over. The time for setting a trap, for writing the final, true, and deeply satisfying chapter of this story myself had just begun. The grief I felt for the loss of my best friend was a real and terrible thing, but it was a luxury I could not afford. Grief is a passive emotion. It is the quiet, sad work of processing a loss that has already occurred. What I was facing was not a loss. It was an ongoing, active, and deeply personal war. And in wartime, one does not grieve. One strategizes. My dining room table, the site of my emotional breakdown, was transformed into a command center. Oh, my son. David and I spent the rest of that Saturday in a state of cold, focused, and deeply furious purpose. The evidence of Margo's betrayal was spread out before us, the credit reports with their litany of fraudulent accounts, the printout of the P.O. Box registration bearing her signature, the bank statements with their small, cancerous, unexplained charges. We were no longer a mother and son. We were a legal team, a plaintiff and his counsel. And we were building our case. We have enough to go to the police right now, David said, his voice a low, angry hum as he paced the length of the room. Conspiracy, fraud, identity theft. It's a mountain of felonies. They would arrest her. No, I said, my voice quiet but absolute. He stopped pacing and looked at me. No, he asked, his lawyer's mind clearly baffled by my refusal of a clear legal victory. An arrest isn't enough, I explained, the historian in me taking over the part of me that understood the long arc of narratives. She would have a story. She would claim I was a confused, forgetful old woman, that I gave her permission and forgot. She would use our friendship, our 15 years of trust, as her shield. She would twist my own memory against me. It would be a messy, ugly he said, she said, battle. And her reputation in this community, she is beloved. I am a quiet, private academic. Who do you think they would believe? Okay? Looked at him, my resolve hardening into something sharp and clear. I don't want to just arrest her. David, I want to catch her. I want to catch her in the act, with her hands so deep in the digital cookie jar that there is no plausible deniability. I want to strip her of her story. I want the evidence to be so absolute, so undeniable, that the only thing she has left is the truth of what she is, a common, greedy, and profoundly stupid thief. A slow, grim smile of understanding spread across my son's face. He was not just my lawyer anymore. He was my co-conspirator. "Okay, Mom," he said. "Okay, let's set a trap." Our first meeting was on Monday morning at the Scottsdale Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. We met with a detective named Chen, a sharp, cynical, and deeply unimpressed man who looked like he had seen every scam and con in the book. He listened to our story with a practiced, weary patience. I could see the skepticism in his eyes. An old woman, a helpful best friend, a series of misunderstandings. It was a story he had heard 100 times. Then David, in his capacity as my legal counsel, began to lay out the evidence. He was brilliant. He was not an emotional son. He was a prosecutor, building his case piece by piece. He presented the credit reports. He presented the fraudulent applications. And he presented the final damning proof. The rental agreement for the P.O. box, with Margo Sterling's signature, clear as day, a piece of evidence he had already had a private investigator officially verify. Watched as Detective Chen's entire demeanor shifted. The weary boredom was replaced by a keen professional interest. He leaned forward, studying the documents. "Okay," he said, a new, hard edge to his voice. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a long-term, premeditated fraud." We spent the next 2 hours with him and with the fraud specialists from my brokerage firm and my bank on a conference call. We laid out the plan. It was a classic sting operation, a beautiful, elegant trap made of digital breadcrumbs and my own feigned incompetence. The police could not act on the past crimes without a long investigation. But if we could catch her in the middle of a new crime, a major in-progress felony like wire fraud, they could act immediately. The trap was set. Now I had to play my part. I had to go back to being the bait. The next 2 weeks were the most difficult and the most brilliantly acted of my entire life. Had to pretend that the shattering discovery had never happened. I had to re-engage with my best friend, my predator, and act as if I were still her trusting, slightly dotty, and deeply grateful friend. I called her the day after my meeting with David. My voice, a carefully constructed performance of an old woman in a panic. "Margo, I'd cried. Something terrible has happened. I got another one of those letters about a home equity loan. I am so scared. I don't know what to do." She had, of course, rushed right over, her face a perfect mask of concerned, righteous anger. And I had let her help me. Let her be the one to call the bank, to put the freeze on my accounts, to comfort me. "Oh, Judy, you poor dear," she'd said, holding my hand, her touch now feeling like the dry, scaly skin of a snake. "This is a full-blown assault. We have to change everything. Every password, every security question." And so we did. With Margo sitting beside me, I had called my bank, my credit card companies, and my brokerage firm. I had, with her helpful suggestions, changed all my passwords. The new password for my main investment account, the one we had set up with the fraud department, was Richard Vance 1948. The name of my late husband and the year of his birth. A password so personal, so sentimental, that she would never suspect. It was a fake. And then I had performed the final crucial act of my own foolish old woman persona. I had taken the little leather-bound password book she had given me, and as she watched, I had carefully, with my slightly shaky elderly handwriting, written down the new fake password. Brokerage account, Richard Vance, 1948. "Oh, Judy, you shouldn't write it down," she'd said, her voice a perfect imitation of a concerned friend. "Nonsense," I'd replied, playing my part. "At my age, if I don't write it down, I'll never remember it. Just keep this book in my desk drawer. It will be our little secret." I had placed the baited hook, and she, in her arrogant confidence, had swallowed it whole. The final piece of the plan was the trip. I told her, a week later, with a great show of childish excitement, that my son David was taking me on a surprise, a week-long trip to Seattle to see my grandchildren. "Oh, how wonderful for you." She'd gushed, her eyes lighting up with a greedy, predatory glee that she thought I was too stupid to see. "You deserve a break after all this stress." "I know," I'd said. "And Margo, you are such a dear. Would you mind terribly watching the house for me again? Getting the mail?" "Of course not, Judy," she'd said, her voice a purr. "You know I will. You just go and have a wonderful time, and don't you worry about a single thing here. I will take care of everything." The day of my departure was a masterpiece of theater. Margo insisted on driving me to the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. She helped me with my suitcase. She hugged me at the curb. "Have the most wonderful time," she'd said, her eyes shining. I had waved goodbye, a frail, grateful old woman, and had walked into the departures terminal. I had waited 10 minutes. And then I had walked out a different exit and had gotten into the back of my son's waiting car. We did not go to Seattle. We went to a quiet, anonymous airport hotel, a place with a strong, reliable internet connection. We checked into a room and David set up his laptop. This was our command center. He had a direct, secure line to the lead fraud investigator at the brokerage firm and to Detective Chen at the Scottsdale PD. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. The house was empty. And the hunters were in position, watching and waiting. I sat in a stiff, uncomfortable hotel armchair, a cup of hotel coffee in my hand. I looked at my son, at his grim, focused, lawyer's face, illuminated by the glow of the laptop screen. And I thought of Margo, my best friend of 15 years, who was, at this very moment, probably letting herself into my quiet, empty condo, her heart full of greed, her mind full of numbers, completely and utterly unaware that her entire, comfortable, fraudulent world was about to come to a swift, decisive, and beautifully orchestrated end. Our command center was a deeply unglamorous room at a mid-range airport hotel, a place that smelled of stale air and industrial-strength carpet cleaner. For 2 days, this beige anonymous box was the entire world. David, my son, my lawyer, my co-conspirator, sat hunched over his laptop at the small desk. A direct and secure chat line open to the head of security at my brokerage firm, and a dedicated phone line to Detective Chen. I sat in the stiff, uncomfortable armchair by the window, a history book open on my lap, though I had been staring at the same unread page for the past 3 hours. We were not watching the clock. We were watching a digital tripwire, waiting for the wolf to take the bait. The waiting was a strange and terrible form of grief. In the long, quiet hours, my mind, with its historian's obsession for the past, kept replaying the last 15 years of my friendship with Margo. I saw us laughing over a game of canasta in the clubhouse. I saw her bringing me a home-cooked meal the day after my husband, Robert, had passed away, sitting with me in the crushing silence of my newly empty house, her presence a solid, comforting warmth. I remembered her holding my hand at his funeral. Had it all been a lie? Every laugh, every shared confidence, every act of kindness. Or had she been my friend, my true and genuine friend, before the greed had curdled her soul into something ugly and unrecognizable? Was she a monster who had been wearing a mask for 15 years? Or was she a good woman who had, somewhere along the way, become a monster? Realized with a deep and profound sadness that I would never know the answer. And that, in its own way, was the most painful part of her betrayal. The friendship itself was now a corrupted archive. Every happy memory tainted by the bitter, retroactive poison of her crime. The alert came on the second day, a quiet, unassuming ping from David's laptop that was as loud as a cannon shot in. The silent room. "We've got her," he said, his voice a low, intense hum. He leaned closer to the screen. "The security team at the firm just flagged it. A login to your primary investment account. IP address is a match for her home address in Solana Oasis." I stood up, my book falling unnoticed to the floor, and went to stand behind him. The security team, as part of our sting, had created a mirrored dummy version of my account that we could watch in real time. We were about to become silent, invisible witnesses to the attempted murder of my financial life. On the screen, I saw a mouse cursor, moving with a confident, unhurried precision across a perfect replica of my own portfolio. It was her. I could almost feel her presence, her smug satisfaction, just a few miles away, sitting at her own dining room table, believing me to be 1,000 miles away in Seattle. We watched, in a state of strange clinical detachment, as she performed the digital heist. The cursor moved to the Transfers tab. It clicked on Wire Transfer. It selected Liquidate Full Portfolio, my entire life savings. The product of 50 years of hard work and careful planning by me and my late husband, reduced to a single, terrifying number on his screen. Then she began to type in the destination account information. The bank was in the Cayman Islands. The account name was a numbered, anonymous corporation. She had been planning this for a very, very long time. She paused for a moment after typing in the final digit of the account number. I imagined her, sitting there, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand, a triumphant smile on her face. I imagined her taking a deep, satisfying breath before the final, life-faltering click. The cursor moved to the large, green, and deeply ironic button at the bottom of the screen. To confirm transfer. It clicked. David, my son, his face a mask of cold, controlled. Fury picked up the dedicated phone line to the police. His voice was a quiet, steady, and utterly final command. "She's done it, detective," he said. Go. The silence in the hotel room after that was different. It was the silence of a trap that has been sprung. It's the silence of a story that is hurtling towards its inevitable and now rapidly approaching conclusion. We just sat there watching the frozen screen. The confirmed wire transfer, a monument to her crime. Less than 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Detective Chen. "We're on site, Mr. Grant," he said, his voice a low, professional. And we have her in custody." "Was she cooperative?" David asked. I heard the detective let out a short, dry chuckle on the other end of the line. "Not exactly. We entered the premises as per the warrant, and we found Ms. Sterling sitting at her dining room table. Her laptop was open to the brokerage firm's confirmation page, and she was in the middle of pouring herself a glass of champagne, celebrating. The image was so perfect, so utterly, beautifully, and damnably in character that I had to sit down. She didn't see us coming." The detective continued. "When we announced our presence, she was so shocked she dropped a bottle. There is currently a very expensive bottle's worth of Veuve Clicquot soaking into her very expensive white rug." He paused. She says it was all a misunderstanding. She says her best friend, a confused and forgetful old woman named Judith Hemlock, had asked her to help with a financial transaction. I believe that is what we in the business call a defense strategy. We have her and we have everything. The laptop, the phone records, the offshore account information. It's a clean bust. I took the phone from David. Detective, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Thank you. No, ma'am, he said, and for the first time I heard a note of genuine human warmth in his professional voice. Thank you, and your son. You did our job for us. You enjoy your trip to Seattle. The story of the Solana grifter was a sensation. It was the talk of every golf course, every clubhouse, every bridge game in Scottsdale. The Scottsdale Progress ran a front-page story with a picture of Margo, looking beautiful and charming, next to a picture of her being led from her condo in handcuffs. The headline was a masterpiece of local news sensationalism. The Sweetheart Swindler. How a beloved socialite allegedly preyed on her elderly best friend. My name was kept out of it, at my request. I was simply the victim, a sharp 70 widow who refused to be a victim. But everyone in Solana Oasis knew who I was. And my quiet academic life was briefly and uncomfortably interrupted by a new kind of social status. I was a hero. A quiet, badass old lady who had taken down a predator. The most surprising and most satisfying consequence was the other women. A few days after the story broke, a woman from my book club approached me, her face a mixture of shame and relief. Judy, she'd whispered. Margo, she helped me set up my online bill pay last year. And I've been missing small amounts of money ever since. I thought I was just getting forgetful. There were others. A woman whose valuable antique jewelry had gone missing after Margo had house sat for her. Another whose credit card had been mysteriously compromised after Margo had helped her order something online. My sting operation hadn't just saved my own life savings. It had exposed a pattern. It had saved who knows how many other trusting, vulnerable women from becoming her next victim. Margo. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence and a parade of new witnesses, did not go to trial. She pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Her beautiful condo was sold to pay back the debts she had accrued on my stolen credit cards and to cover my own significant legal fees. I am sitting here now in my quiet, peaceful, and wonderfully secure condo. My finances are my own again. My passwords are a series of complex, unguessable, and never written down strings of characters that I have, with David's patient help, learn to store in a secure, encrypted password manager. I am the master of my own digital domain. The friendship is a ghost, a sad 15-year-long story that I will be processing for the rest of my life. The betrayal was a deep and terrible wound, but the revenge? The revenge was not an act of passion. It was an act of intellectual self-defense. It was a refusal to be the frail, confused, and easily manipulated old woman she had assumed I was. It was a history professor teaching one final, unforgettable lesson about cause and effect. And it was a story with a deeply, profoundly, and justly satisfying end. The conviction of Margo Sterling was a cleansing fire. It swept through our quiet community of Solana Oasis, burning away the rot of her deception and leaving behind a strange, clean, and somewhat barren landscape. The women she had preyed upon, myself included, had our money restored, our accounts secured. The law had provided a neat, tidy, and satisfying conclusion. Her name became a cautionary tale, a ghost that haunted the clubhouse conversations for a year or so before fading into the stuff of legend. The Solana grifter was gone, and I The woman who had orchestrated her downfall had my quiet, orderly, and secure life back. But it was a different kind of quiet now. The silence of my condo, which had once been a peaceful sanctuary, now felt empty. The truth about a betrayal like Margot's is that the thief doesn't just steal your money. They steal your past. They take 15 years of shared laughter, of trusted secrets, of holiday meals and quiet conversations, and they poison it all. Looking back, I could no longer see the memory of a genuine friendship. I could only see the long, patient, and deeply cynical methodology of a predator grooming her prey. My past was a corrupted archive, and the experience had left me with a profound and lasting scar, a deep, abiding, and entirely logical suspicion of my fellow human beings. I became a fortress. I was polite to my neighbors, but I kept my distance. I stopped going to the book club Margo had started. I resigned from the community's social committee. I did not, under any circumstances, play bridge. The game we had shared, the ritual. That had been the bedrock of our friendship, was a territory too haunted for me to revisit. My son David would visit from Phoenix, and he would look at me with worried eyes. "You're isolating yourself, Mom," said to me one afternoon as we sat on my patio. "I'm protecting myself, David," I had replied, my voice a little too sharp. "There is a difference." "Is there?" he'd asked gently. "Or have you just built the walls so high that you've turned your entire life into a prison? Don't let what she did take the rest of your life from you, too." His words, as they so often were both wise and deeply annoying. I knew he was right. I was safe, but I was not living. I was a historian who had locked herself in the archives, afraid of the messy, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous world outside. The catalyst for change came, as it so often does, in the form of a new arrival. The condo next to mine, Margot's old unit, had been sold. I watched with a certain detached dread as the new resident moved in. I was preparing myself for a new front in the war for my own peace and quiet. But my new neighbor was not a new enemy. He was a man named Arthur, a retired classics professor from the University of Chicago. A recent widower who had moved to Scottsdale to be closer to his own daughter. He was, like me, a quiet, academic soul. I would see him on his patio, surrounded by stacks of books, a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. We would exchange polite, neighborly waves. And that was all. One Tuesday afternoon. Driven by a force I did not quite understand, perhaps it was my son's words. Perhaps it was just a deep and profound boredom with my own self-imposed isolation. A. Did something I had not done in 2 years. I went to the clubhouse during the weekly bridge game. The room was full of familiar faces. The women from my old life, my old social circle. They greeted me with a warm, if slightly surprised, enthusiasm. "Judith, it's been ages." "Oh, we missed you." I was immediately invited to join a table, but they only had 3 players. They needed a 4th, a partner for me. And then I saw him. My quiet new neighbor was sitting in a comfortable armchair in the corner of the room, reading a thick, intimidating-looking book on Roman history. And on an impulse, a wild, reckless, and entirely uncharacteristic impulse, I walked over to him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little shaky. "I know we've only just met, but I have to ask, by any chance, do you play bridge?" He looked up from his book, his eyes a clear, intelligent blue, regarding me with a look of gentle surprise. "As a matter of fact, I do," he said with a small, quiet smile, "though I am quite out of practice." "So am I said. "Would you be willing to be my partner?" And so I played. I sat down at the bridge table, the familiar. Feel of the cards in my hands both a comfort and a source of a deep residual pain. My new partner, Arthur, was, as I had suspected, a brilliant and logical player. He was also a kind one. Our bids were cautious at first, two strangers learning each other's language. But as the afternoon wore on, we found our rhythm. Bridge is a game of profound and necessary trust. You cannot win alone. You must trust that your partner will understand your signals. You must trust that they will cover your weaknesses. You must trust that they have a plan. With Margo, our game had been a reflection of our friendship, flashy, aggressive, and, as I now knew, built on a foundation of lies. She had always been a bluffer, a player who would overbid her hand, relying on her charisma to intimidate our opponents. Arthur was the opposite. He was a quiet, careful, and deeply honest player. He did not bluff. He did not grandstand. He simply played the cards he was dealt, and he did it with a quiet, analytical brilliance. And he trusted me to do the same. We won, of course, decisively. After the game, we walked back to our condos together in the warm, late afternoon sun. "You are a very good player, Judith," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "So are you," I replied. "You're a very honest player." He smiled. "It's the only way I know how to play," he said. "What's the point of the game, otherwise?" It was a simple question, but it struck me with the force of a revelation. What's the point of the game? For 15 years, I had been playing a game with Margo, and I had never truly understood the rules. Because she had been playing a different game entirely, a game of deception. In that moment, I realized that my revenge, the sting operation, the arrest, the public fallout tit, had not been the end of the story. It had just been the clearing of the board, final, necessary, and deeply unpleasant act of sweeping the cheater from the table. It is Sunday now, and the late evening air on my patio is cool and sweet. I am not alone. Arthur is here. We have just finished a quiet, comfortable dinner. A bottle of good red wine sits between us. We have been talking for hours about history, about books, about this strange, quiet, and unexpected turns a life can take. My friendship with him is nothing like the one I had with Margo. It is not a whirlwind of social activity. It is a quiet, comfortable, and deeply respectful meeting of two minds. It is a friendship built not on a shared traumatic past, but on a shared and hopeful present. My son was right. I had built a fortress around myself after Margo's betrayal. It had kept me safe. But it had also kept me in a prison of my own making. My real revenge, my true final act of victory, was not the day Margo was arrested. It was the day I found the courage to walk back into that clubhouse, to sit down at that table, and to say to a kind-faced stranger, "Will you be my partner?" It was the day I decided to trust again. The greatest risk, I have learned, is not in being betrayed. The greatest risk is in allowing that betrayal to be the final chapter of your story. I had been cheated, yes, but I had decided to play another hand. And this time I knew with a quiet, joyful, and deeply peaceful certainty that I was going to win.